I work for a company called Instructure. Currently, I am the mobile UX designer for that company. I work on the iOS team. So there's 16 different designers, UX designers on the team. About 5 of those are called UI engineers or UX engineers. I don't know their exact titles, but they're more front-end development. They don't actually do as much design work. And I'm one of 2 mobile designers on the mobile team. So I'm over the iOS team and the Android team. I'm not over the Android team. There's another designer that's on the Android team. But yeah, Instructure, we have a product called Canvas. We're a fairly large company, 650 employees plus, and it's a really good company. You should check them out for internships or for jobs after you guys are done working. Also, as we talk, just feel free to ask questions at any time, as well as we can ask questions afterwards as well. So I work for Instructure. I want to just do a quick plug of the Front Conference. Who here has heard of the Front Conference? Oh, more people than I thought. Okay, cool. So I'm one of the co-founders of the Front Conference, which is a larger conference. So we've got Salt Lake Design Week, which is next week, which is kind of a 2-day event that it's kind of like a la carte. It's a mini front. That's kind of how I think of it. But it's tied to Salt Lake Design Week, which is a larger organization that has like the other groups, like you were saying, with industrial design, fashion, all sorts of different other things, and then we're just kind of part of it. But Front is a conference that we put together that focuses on specifically UX and product management. So as a UX designer, you always work with a product manager, and you're very tied to a product manager or 2 product managers. So we wanted a conference here in Utah that we didn't have to travel to San Francisco, or we didn't have to beg our companies to like go somewhere else to learn stuff. We wanted to bring those people to Utah and to kind of build that community. So last June we had 350 people. We're hoping to have a lot more next May. To do a little plugs, we haven't announced many of these yet, but we'll have somebody from Airbnb, we'll have somebody from BuzzFeed, we'll have somebody from potentially LinkedIn, we'll have somebody from Pinterest as well to speak, as well as some local companies like we did last year. So, and those are not just like anybody, they're not just the little me's working for those companies. It's like the VP of design for Pinterest, the VP of product for LinkedIn, some pretty well known, and these companies are larger companies, more experienced. So check it out. We have discounts for students, like half off discounts. So today I wanted to talk through, I came up with a title called Design for Utility to be clever and whatnot, but really it's just, I wanted to focus on art, design, and interaction design. So, and I kind of want to just talk about the differences. So, I'll quickly just go over art and design, but we'll focus mostly on interaction design. So, art, I just wanted to talk about. So this little graphic thing is what I call the 8 eyes of UX. This is my own personal thing that I use. I did a self-evaluation of what I actually do as a UX designer, and then I kind of created these buckets. So, and I tried to just make it easy for me to remember. But each one of those things is a piece in the user experience design. I can go in more depth to all of those if you want later. You can ask me any questions. But tonight I'm just going to focus in on these 3: imagine, iterate, and illustrate. So. And that's all part of the interaction design pieces. But so for art, I just wanted to quickly say, I went to BYU. I got a degree. I went in the graphic design program, but I actually got a degree in visual arts. So technically, I kind of came out of school as an artist. My dad said, "What the crap? You're not going to get a job in art, so we'll figure out something else. So I kind of went the graphic design route because I knew I could make a living on it, and that was the thing I wanted to do. But so for art specifically, I still consider myself somewhat of an artist. But so art, the expression or an application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Today, the things that I do on an everyday basis, I don't do any sculpturing, I don't do any producing of artworks or commissions to paint people's faces or their websites. I used to think that when you went to design a website that it was like, I wanted to take a really ugly thing and make it an art piece in a digital format. And that's what I did, that's what I sold to people, they bought it, but it really didn't actually, it helped them, but it didn't help them, it wasn't the thing that made them stay for what I was designing for. It wasn't the thing that, they went to the site, they saw that it was pretty, and then they left. Like, it wasn't really useful to them as a user. So I was just gonna show this. This is art. This is self-expression. I create this thing and people either like it or don't like it. I didn't create it for anybody, but I wanted to express how I was thinking. This is a good thing, but it's not interaction design. Creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is knowing which ones to keep. So I put this in here. Do you guys know who Paul Rand is? Paul Rand is a logo designer. He designs some pretty iconic logos, and like one of his logos was like $1 million. You designed a logo for $1 million. You can look into him, but I really like this quote because we can talk to it a little bit later. So there's art, there's creativity. Don't disvalue creativity and don't disvalue art. But I liked this part that it said like art is knowing which ones to keep. So that's part of interaction design, and we'll go over that a little bit later. So design, if you go quickly to just design. Design is a specification of an object manifested by some agent intended to accomplish goals in a particular environment using a set of primitive components satisfying a set of requirements subject to some constraints. It gets a little bit more complicated. Design is subjective a little bit. It's what is design? There's a fork design. It's very broad, right? So design is a broad thing. A lot of people, there's a lot of criticism in the interaction design world about Dribble. Who knows what Dribble is? Who's got something on Dribble? Who considers Dribble a portfolio? Who would admit that they would consider
it? Could be.
Could be.
It could be, but just copying other people's work and then uploading things. I think if you use Dribble for what it was intended for, you could show your progress and.
Yeah, it's how you use it, not actually the tool. So, but a lot of people criticize it because it's very static. It doesn't show process unless you use it to try to show that process. But it's very visual. This is still, I mean, the top left one is Envision, and it's showing a comp of a very complicated program, but it doesn't show the interaction of how they got that. But this still, it really isn't interaction design. It's design. It's visual design. So I have a quote here: design is the method of putting form and content together. Design, just as art, has multiple definitions. There is no single definition. Design can be art. Design can be aesthetics. Design is so simple. That's why it's so complicated. It's really broad. So design in general is great. but you can go so many different directions with it. You can design a magazine, you can design a chair, you can design, it's what you make it to be, right? So now let's go into specifically interaction design. So interaction design, the practice of designing interactive digital products, environments, systems, services, with the main focus being on behavior. So that last part is kind of what I want to focus on, is with the main focus being on behavior. We're designing either software or hardware systems and how you use them. So it's human-computer interaction design. So how do we design something with the intention for it to be used and observe that, how it was used, and then make it better. Make it do what it was designed to do. So I'll put in utility because I threw that in my title. A state of being useful, profitable, or beneficial to the users and the creators. So what we're designing isn't art. I'm not designing it for myself and people like it or not like it. It's not just design for visual design's sake. Does it have a drop shadow? Does it not have a drop shadow? Interaction design is even deeper than that. So if we want to design for something that's even deeper than that, we have to go into things that aren't at that surface level. So think of like the clothes that I'm wearing, it's just surface, right? But utility and interaction design is deeper than that. So this is where I go into my 8 eyes of UX, and we'll go into imagine, iterate, and illustrate. So imagine is what I just named that section as an I word for like site mapping. Who knows what site mapping is? Okay, so site mapping is the first step into interaction design, in my opinion, to helping you understand what you're designing. So when I usually say site map, I usually get a lot of people like, what's a site map? Like, what's the purpose of it? Why would you spend time on it? Like, I think it's a waste of time. Stop doing it. Like, no one needs it. I need it as an interaction designer, personally. So I'm going to go into a thing I designed for, a site map I started designing for Experticity, a company I used to work for. We were going through, just to set the stage real quick, we were going through what was called, we were morphing everything into Experticity. So we had 2 products, 3.5 promotive, and then we had these like white label things that we called a private retail or a pro site. So we had these 2 products, and we wanted to morph them into one product called Experticity. And for me to wrap my head around that, I needed to visualize it somehow. And I did that through site mapping. So I said, I need to understand what our current site structures are to mesh two sites into one. So it was the same application, the engine that ran them was the same thing, but there were 2 different audiences, and there were just tiny differences that made it not easy for them to come together. So primarily this is more of a development task, but if I was to understand what I needed to do to kind of morph these 2 in, I had to like figure out the structure of our site was. So I built this map of all the pages. I went through all the pages of 3.5. There's a logged in site and a logged out site, which is kind of the definition of a web application. There's users. The users saw certain things that a non-user didn't see. You had to be a member to see these parts of it, and these parts of it you didn't. And I needed to understand all of that, so I put it all together. When you look at that, does it kind of make sense? Like, just without me saying too much, does it kind of make sense what the logged in state of 3.5 was? I mean, I'm using terms that might not make sense to you, like manufacturer sites and, well, what's a manufacturer site? But it like buckets all the sections and how it's organized, and it was organized for that way in for a certain reason. It was organized that way by developers, not designers. They didn't design it that way. It was organized that way just because that's the way that they thought it was built. That's the way that developers think. They want to organize things into folders, and they want to build it certain ways. And they had to sell it a certain way. So I was trying to understand this so that I could morph it into what I needed it to be. And then I'll show you another just example of this is the logged in sitemap, and this is the logged out. Kind of just give you an idea of me trying to understand how things work. And then what I did is I took these, I printed up on 11 by 17, and I put them on a whiteboard, and I brought my VP of product in, and I brought my developers in, and I said, okay, we want to make it an experticity, and we want it to speak to these two audiences. I did one of these for Promoted too, which was our other platform. And I put them all up on a screen, and I said, what don't we need? What do we need? And I just crossed things off right on the paper, and just we drew out. So we put these on a whiteboard, and then right here we did another one, and we just drew out the wireframe or the sitemap of experticity, what we wanted it to be, and then from there I had actual building blocks that I could go design. Otherwise, I was really just kind of shooting in the air. Is this what you want? Is this what you want? Is this solving a need? Without this, it doesn't really make sense. So you might be asking, well, what if we don't even have a site yet? What if this is a startup and we don't have anything? It's kind of hard to start right there at a sitemap level when you don't really understand what problems you're trying to solve. So this sometimes comes after the next steps. But I like to do it before if I'm really trying to understand something that already exists. So my next step in my process of UX is to iterate, so to draw. So you might ask, I mean, this is another one of those things where I say, hey, let's draw out a few things. I'll even ask developers to draw stuff. I'll ask a developer and a product manager and say, tell me what you're thinking. If we're having a discussion about designing something, tell me what you're thinking and draw it out for me, because I can understand you a lot better when you draw it out. Sometimes I get this whole, you're an artist, you know how to draw, and I get these looks like, what? I can't draw it out. I just explained it in words. Like, you should understand what I'm trying to say here. Like, and they're just, no, I don't want to draw it out. But I try to make them. I do it myself, or I do it with them. So I end up doing a lot of just whiteboard, like sketching stuff out. This is a sketch of it's kind of more of a sitemap than a sketch, sketching out wireframes or whatnot, or different designs. But this was for us we were refactoring our whole e-commerce, and we needed to figure out what sections that needed to be. Then me and a UX engineer, front-end developer, got in a room, and we just started drawing this stuff out together. We get into meetings and we say, well, we need to do this thing. We need to redesign our search sections. And well, I'm trying to. This is an example of. The problem was I needed a way for a user to be able to favorite categories. And how do we do that? So we thought of, okay, let's allow them to search for something. Okay, I like biking. So I can just search for biking instead of like Amazon, where it's like 500 categories. I could just search for bike, and it would come up and I could favorite it somehow. We just sketched out some ideas. This probably took us 20 minutes. And that led to a design. and we were kind of designing that together. So when I presented a design to a developer or my creative director, that was it wasn't like a surprise. It wasn't like, this is a brand new idea. Oh, we already talked about this, now we're refining it. So we're designing for utility there. Here's another example of just some wireframes we did in a meeting. This was a profile. So we needed to rethink how our users had their profiles, and it was going to become a central piece of our application. So we started throwing together a bunch of different ideas, and this was in a meeting. This was in a meeting with 20 developers, and they couldn't make decisions. So I just got up. I don't know who was talking. It was probably like one of the executives or something. I'm like, okay. He was talking, and I just got up behind him, and I just started drawing stuff on the wall. And when I drew stuff out, all the developers started pointing at it, saying like, "Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about." And then I would draw something else that another developer was talking about, and he's like, "So," and then I would go, "Is this what you mean by this?" And then we got to a point, even a developer on a phone call could tell when she knew it well enough, but she was like, she could tell. We basically were in sync on what we were trying to do, but it helped speed the conversation. It speeds the conversation up in big companies or big organizations when you can draw stuff out. Here's an example of a speed sketching session that we did with 4 or 5 UX designers. I started up in that top left. Problem we were trying to solve was we have too many navigations stacking on top of one another. So we got into this situation where one designer was designing the main navigation, I was designing a navigation for the e-commerce that lived inside of that navigation, and then we have the search navigation and how we're going to handle that responsively, and we got into this like 4 stacking navigations on top of each other because we were all designing in silos. So we all got together and we said, let's solve this problem with navigation. So, and our creative director said, okay, everybody take a piece of paper and I'm going to give you 15 minutes or 10 minutes to draw out some solutions. So I took that top one, what we currently had, and then I went to the next one and said, what if we did that? And then I took that next one, moved the avatar, that square thing, down to the bottom right, and that kind of collapsed it a little bit. What if I put it up top higher? That collapses a little bit. Okay, the up higher is kind of working. Well, what if I did like a breadcrumb navigation, and then what if I don't do a breadcrumb navigation at all and I do a drop down? And then I go back up to this top area and I try out all these different options, and we kind of nailed on that bottom right. Me and another designer kind of ended up in a similar sketch, and we said, that's kind of looks like what we could go for. And what we ended up doing was we had a main navigation that was really simple, and then any navigation that we needed within each section became like the core navigation of that section. Okay, what time do you want me to stop at?
Maybe 8 minutes.
Okay, so I'll go a little bit faster. Okay, so here's just a few examples of what I'm doing, what I've done right now for Instructure. I'm on the mobile team, so we're doing a brand new app for them, and I did this all in a day. I looked at about 20 different apps, and I just took things that they were doing and sketched them out real quick so that I could basically ideate in my own head what what might work for our application. So I'm not stealing this application and just verbatim copying it, but I'm taking a piece of what I think is working really well for them, and I say, okay, Twitter has a profile, it's a pretty awesome profile page. I need a profile page. What can I do to create, what are they doing well that I like, that I can pull into mine? And I can almost like just verbatim copy it with Sketch, and I'm not cheating, but it helps me think through my problem and say, well, what if this was I'm designing an app for parents that are looking at their students, and I can say, okay, what if this was a student, what would happen if their name was here? Is it solving all the content that I need in mine? And I just iterate through a bunch of them. And then, I don't know if you can see it, because I use this like really tiny, like, what do you call those, mechanical pencils? And then I just write little tiny text next to each one to kind of remind myself where I got that idea from, or what I was trying to, just to really, I don't want to write things out, I don't want to think too much, but that helps me. So the next step that I go through is called, I do illustrate wireframing. Who's heard of wireframing? Okay, so I do all my wireframing. There's multiple programs that you can use to do wireframing. I just do all my wireframing in Sketch. The Sketch app. Who's heard of Sketch app? Okay, you guys are all on top thing. I like this. So I just use Sketch, and I just do gray box wireframes. So here's just a funny thing. I like that. It's not the same though. So you'll be surprised though that how much you have to teach other people what wireframing is. You might know what wireframing is because you were taught it, but even in tech companies, I swear like 10% of people know what wireframe means. People that aren't part of like the product team or the development team, if you say wireframe, or if you show it to a user you're trying to test with, they're like, why is it all gray? Are you planning on putting color in this? Like, I kind of like the simplicity of it. But it's, anyway, yeah, I thought that was funny. But here's some examples of wireframes that I did for Experticity. Here, I'll give you a few reasons I use wireframes. So one, it helps me not get too pixel perfect. So I use wireframes because I don't have to worry about if there's drop shadows, but I'm an artist enough that I can use contrast with a single color. Think of it as like blueprints, where you can kind of just take an idea, but all you're doing is typography and color contrast. That's all you're doing. You don't have to worry about whether it's the right font, or if it was the right pixel size, or if it was the right amount of content. It's all, you don't have to be pixel perfect. Helps me define reusable components. So I'll take this, I took that, oh shoot, no, here. Oh. Boo.
I'll read it.
Anyway.
Or maybe she just pray.
Wiggle, wiggle. That guy will fix it. But I'll take a component that I had, that box, right? And then I have a title, description, and then I have an image. And then I took that exact same thing and I reused it. So I created that component, which I call a category card, and I reuse it. I create a symbol in Sketch, and I just reuse it. So if I needed to change something, I'd show it to a developer and say, how does that look? He's like, well, what if we did this? Sketch it out. Well, what if we had a button right here? A big fat button that everybody can understand. I'll make a button, I'll put it in there, and it just replicates to all 5 of those. I don't have to do anything, it took me 5 seconds. And then I create one, like a back example of a card. I take a product card and I put a circle to kind of emulate, like this is the artist in me, like being abstract, big circle, because it's gonna be white behind the product image. It's not square. Square means it's a full background image. Circle is I don't like to do, but it doesn't make any difference. But and I'll create a product name, and then I'll create like this prototype, this wireframe sketch document. I probably had 12 of those screens with different states of the filter turned on, turned off. But I had that component, a product card, was just one symbol. So if I changed anything, it would change it on 50 of those cards across the multiple screens that I had in Sketch. And I can't do that really if I have a product image, a different product image on every single one of those cards and a different name on each one of those cards and a different star value. I can't do that and make a change when I've gone that deep into the design. That's why wireframes makes it easy. And I don't test with wireframes. I don't test with real users with wireframes. I test developers with wireframes. So maybe I could explain that, but I show it to a developer and figure out if it's feasible. If I can get past the feasibility test and say, like find that fine balance between whether it would be really difficult to build or easy to build, and say find that middle ground of saying this is acceptable. I could do that with developers, and then if I have an awesome friend developer with me to work on it, he could go start prototyping that in HTML, CSS, JavaScript in the same fashion that I built it in Sketch. And we're already working together. It's breaking down the process of passing things down the line to get things done faster. So to some people, those little kids, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, wireframing, it's just one extra step. Like, why not just go straight to the design? And but it speeds things up, and people don't realize it until they see it. Yeah.
So these wireframes are pretty high fidelity. You'd say,
Yeah.
right? Some people would say lower fidelity would be better for wireframing. What would you say about that?
So it depends on your definition of high fidelity, and what would be the argument against doing this versus what is lower fidelity?
I guess lower fidelity would just like drawing it out and taking it to users, and doing the wireframe just pencil or something.
Sketching.
Right, and then you can kind of iterate a little bit faster or something like that, and I don't know.
So I still do that. I still do that with sketching before I get to this stage. So if I go back to this product, I did 30 different small sketches before we got to this stage, and we did that in 2 days. And then I did this in 4 days. And then the majority of the time was actually like building it, coding it, getting it done. So this might seem high fidelity because it's a designer doing it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But if I would expect a lower. So if I got something like just boxes like this with lines with text inside of it or something, and that's all it was just straight borders with text inside of it, and it didn't have these fancy little icons or perfect alignment or anything like that, or if it was just more sketchy from a product manager or from a developer that went into Balsamic or a different program that just has those pre-built kind of functionality, it would mean the same thing to me. And I would accept that. Like, as a designer, I would take that, and I would probably do it my way. I use Sketch because it cuts out some of those constraints. Like, say I didn't want to do a segmented control that looked like, or that was this way, but Balsamiq, all they give me is that. And I actually want to just draw it out, but I want to draw it out with a program rather than a pen. It gives me the freedom to do that. Or if I want to try something new, if I want to say, there's not many people on the web doing this, but I want to, what do you think if we did this? I do it this way. But not to say that it could be slightly less fidelity. It's still serving the same purpose of feasibility with a developer. I wouldn't show it to users. Just because they don't understand it enough, you can't get the correct amount of feedback, the correct kind of feedback that you want from an end user. Users don't design websites, but they can tell you when things are wrong. You know what I mean?
So you'd probably show it to a user once the comp is made by a front-end developer, or I guess UI engineer and instructor. Is that when you do user testing and stuff like that?
Yeah. Do you want me to show you that?
Sure.
See if it still exists. I don't work at Particity anymore. Can you see this? No?
Yeah.
You can just mute see.
It goes up. If you go up, they'll see it.
Go up. Now let's move to difficult.
You got it.
Let's go back down for a second. You can mirror it too if you want to. Let's pray that this works. If it doesn't, I'm going to forget the idea. Yeah. No, didn't work. I would have loved to show you that, but you get the idea. Like, so he went and he built. I did a slightly higher fidelity design of it while he was developing the components. Then it was a prototype. It had fake data in it. Then we showed it to users and said, "This makes sense." But it was componentized enough that if we needed to make a change, we could make that change. Or if there was a glaring miss. I know this is not exactly what I was supposed to talk about, but as far as like user testing goes, we actually user tested like 5 different sites that were doing things that we liked on live. That was like, we tested Nixon.com with users, and we were asking questions about things that we wanted to do with ours, and if it made sense with theirs, we could use that to our leverage. We didn't have to have ours designed. We could test a piece of somebody else's stuff and say, okay, that's working for them, it'll work for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we kind of trick, just like go through that process a little bit different. But here's an example of a product page. I'll go through just some wireframes of what I've done for Parent App. The mobile apps that I've been doing, very similar, just a mobile type solutions. I'll throw little graphics in there that are fun. Make people laugh, kind of lighten the mood sometimes, serious workers. But yeah, I use Sketch, and for all those sitemaps that you saw, I use a thing called Lucid Charts, which is a local company here that makes it really easy to just create those boxes, and it creates the arrows for you, and if you move things around, it moves the arrows for you instead of having to like redraw all that stuff in Sketch or Illustrator. It makes that really easy, but I don't use it for wireframing. I use Sketch for that. So last quote, design is not just what it looks like and feels like, design is how it works. I'm just going to throw on Steve Jobs, here you go. Interaction design is not just what it looks like. Interaction design is how it works. Let's be a little bit more specific there. That's me. I mean, hopefully that's helpful information to you, but so basically just Sketch, wireframe, and then do site maps, because it really helps you understand the problems or the piece of the problem if you're working on a big team. Whether you do that first or whether you do that along the way. For some of these like parent app things, I created a site map in hindsight after I'd figured out what we were going to test and what the problems we were going to solve, and so that I could have that big picture so I could show somebody else if they wanted to know. So, yeah.
Thank you.